from Hungary to McGregor and a lot of things in between. On this week's episode, we'll sit down to chat with Krisztina White, McGregor's Women's Ministry Director, and hear an amazing story of God's providence and grace in her life. Welcome to the Here at Home podcast, a podcast about the people here at McGregor, their stories, their ministry, and their love for Jesus. If you're joining us for the first time, my name is Mark Bricker, and I'm the host for the Here at Home podcast. And thank you so much for joining us. We'll bring you a fresh new episode every other week, and we'd love to have you be a part of our Here at Home podcast community. So if you haven't already done so, go ahead and subscribe to this podcast, and that way you'll get a fresh episode delivered each... Okay. I've never done that before. Okay. Do the cue again.
All right. Cue.
Welcome to the Here at Home podcast, a podcast about the people here at McGregor, their stories, their ministry, and their love for Jesus. And if you're joining us for the first time, my name is Mark Bricker, and I'm the host for the Here at Home podcast. And thank you for joining us. We'll bring you a fresh new episode every other week, and we would love to have you be a part of our Here at Home podcast community. So go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already, and that way you'll get each episode delivered straight to your podcast player. And if you're enjoying the podcast, please share it with your friends. So welcome with me, our guest today, Krisztina White. Welcome to the show, Krisztina.
Thank you, Mark. I'm glad to be here.
I am so excited to have you here. I really am. And are you ready for this?
I hope so.
I think you are. Well, most people that are listening probably hear somebody that has a little bit of an accent. And so as we get to know you, you might want to start by telling us, where are you from originally?
I was born and raised in Hungary. It's in the middle of Europe, a little country. And that's where I lived until I was 26 years old.
What was the name of the town?
The town name is Sopron.
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 Oh, I don't know where that is, but I do know where Hungary is.
Right. It's right on the Austrian border. Literally, I could walk to Austria. It was very close.
Very close. So 26 years old when you moved here?
Yes.
All right. Was that any kind of an adjustment for you, or was it just piece of cake?
Oh, no, it was a huge adjustment. My family moved here way earlier than me. I stayed there with my grandparents, and then my grandmother passed away, and my grandfather remarried, and I wanted to be close to my siblings and my family, so I came after that. So I was 26 when I came here, but the adjustment was huge. You know, everything is different in this country, you know, not just the language. The language is the huge part, but... the food, you know, the bread, the milk, you know, our milk was in plastic bags.
What?
Yes, not paper cartons. So, yes,
like
I know.
Plastic Ziploc bags?
No Ziploc. You had to cut it open.
Wow.
I know. And then we had like the special holder for it. So everything is different. When I was looking for milk, I was looking for plastic bags, you know, and I couldn't find them. And then you go to the bread aisle and there's like 200 breads. It's like, oh, we had one, like bread. So there's one bread. There is the bread, there is the milk in a bag, and you know, you come here and you're like, what is all this?
Lots of options.
Lots of options.
How was your English when you first got here?
So I took maybe like a year in high school. So, you know, how much do you really learn? Like basic, like this is the bread, this is the butter, you know, like a basic kitchen language. That's what I knew. That's
so,
it.
Had a little learning curve on that.
Yes. I had a definite learning curve. You know, and then you throw in some slangs, you know, that people throw at you while you're learning the language. Like, oh, I'm just pulling your leg. I'm like, don't touch me. You know, don't touch me. Pulling my leg. I don't know what that means.
What are some other differences as far as like the slang or the language that were hard?
Well, you know, the sentences are put together differently. Just even the culture, you know, just the way people think. Like, I grew up in a culture where... we're very blunt, you know, and my family probably even more blunt than they need to be. And so I had to learn not just to say what I think, because my culture just says what they think, you know, which is not necessarily good, but that's just how it is. And then I come here where everybody is just very polite. And, you know, when I open my mouth, you never know what comes out. You just don't.
That's why I've been looking forward to having you on this podcast.
Which is why it's dangerous without notes to do this.
No filter. That's
No
right.
filter. I had to learn to filter.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so you serve on staff here as an administrative assistant for Pastor David Miller.
Yes.
But you didn't start with that job when you first moved here at 26 years of age. Tell us a little bit about how you got from when you first moved here to ultimately ended up working here at the church.
So because of the language and the very little of that I knew, and because of some connection of my dad, I was able to go and get a job at a furniture shop. So I was working, creating like furniture, like malls, like Burdines. We used to have, Burdines. So we were making all kinds of furniture for jewelry cases and that kind of stuff. So I worked there for years, actually. I was the only woman in the shop. And I think I only were able to do that because I came from a country where we just did what needed to be done. So it wasn't like too weird for me. But
right.
I got a lot of help, from the guys in the shop. So it was good. And learned another version of the language, probably not what I needed, like, everywhere else, because, it's like a router and a filer, like who needs that in life? But I did learn all those words. And then, I wasn't like 100% legally working. Let's just go there. And so one day they had the IRS coming in the front door and they walked me out on the back door. And so I was kind of like without a job. And so I remember then in Hungary, I had some friends that would go and be nannies in England. And so I thought, well, surely I can be a nanny. I mean, I was a school teacher in Hungary. I have an education in this child, so I can be a nanny. So I opened the paper and I found this family who were desperate for nanny. And that I think they thought it was cool to have a woman with an accent because, it's kind of like you have a foreign nanny, like that's
a European
cool. Yeah,
nanny.
a European nanny, exactly. And so they were happy to have me, and I went in there with my elementary school education to take care of a 7-month-old that was not matching. I was like, what in the world am I doing here? So, but God orchestrated that because I learned the American lifestyle. Like, being in this family, I really learned the rich American lifestyle, not the average, but the people with money.
To have a nanny.
You did, to have a nanny. And so, but it was good. I look back and so many things, I wish I knew then, what God was doing in my life with that I just saw years later.
So furniture store to nanny to what was next?
I had some part-time jobs in restaurants, and then I started to work for the same families. The father had a business, construction business. So then I worked in an office, doing accounting and that kind of stuff, office work.
Awesome. So what ultimately got you to McGregor?
So when I was in a restaurant, God specifically sent people from McGregor.
Right?
I was a waitress, yes.
Right.
I was waitressing. And literally God sent like people from McGregor. Every single person, it seemed, came to this restaurant from McGregor to talk to me about Jesus. Like,
now, you didn't know the Lord at this
No,
point.
I did not. I grew up in a Catholic church. And so I knew, it wasn't like I didn't know about the Bible and I knew about Jesus, but I did not have a relationship with him.
Right.
I just knew the rules and the 10 Commandments and the Lord's Prayer. That's about all I knew.
Okay.
And that there's a God. And I believe that. Yes, a chef was a Sunday school teacher here at McGregor back then. A waitress bought me a Bible. A stressful Sunday morning, this old lady came in and she, this is where the Hungarian comes in. She's like, how are you doing, honey? And, in America, you say, fine, thank you. And then, you ask a Hungarian, how are you doing, honey? Oh, I am so stressed today. That was my answer. And she probably like, oh, this poor girl, this waitress. And so she's like, would you like to have God's phone number? And I'm like, looking at her like, there is a phone number to God and nobody told me about this until today? Like, how is that possible?
What?
I know. I'm like, how is this possible? That there's a phone number to God and nobody gave it to me. So she gave me this card with a scripture on it. mind you, I was a little disappointed.
There was no phone number.
No, but it was Jeremiah 33:3. And he said, call on me and I will tell you wonderful things. So, it was kind of God said call on me. But yeah, so that kind of stuff happened. After I got the Bible, this is how God orchestrated. So, I get this Bible from this girl, and then I go home and I start reading Genesis, right? And then you finish Genesis. I mean, Exodus is still good. And then you get to Leviticus. And then you stop when you're not a Christian. You're like, I'm done at this point. Like, who wants to know that?
Yeah, and most Christians even stop it.
Right, exactly. So so what does God do? Brings an old couple in for breakfast. And I'm the only person in the restaurant except the chef in the kitchen. And this gentleman, this elderly gentleman, is having his birthday. And the wife is, celebrating with breakfast. And she says to me while he goes to the bathroom, could you do something special for her and for him? And I'm like, well, like what? Like stick a candle in the eggs? Like, I don't know what to do here. But thankfully, he orders strawberry waffles with whipped cream. Now I can do something with that. You can stick a candle in that.
Yeah, exactly.
So I stuck a candle in there and I sang happy birthday to him. And so he opens his gift and it's a travel Bible, is what his wife bought him because he traveled a lot. And so he looks at me and he says, do you read a Bible? And so I said, well, I kind of did, but I got through like these 2 parts and then like I just had to stop. I saw it and she's like, where did you start? I'm like, in the beginning. I mean, where do you start a book, right? You start in the beginning. He's like, honey, no, you have to read John. You have to go to the book of John. So I literally went home that night and I found the book of John and I started to read it and I don't think I stopped since, just reading the Bible.
That started
my quest toward McGregor because all these people came from McGregor. It had to do with McGregor. Bill Camp used to sit there, drink coffee. I didn't know him back then. But so, yeah, and then a friend worked here and said, oh, there's an opening. Pastor David Miller, gonna hire a new secretary because Tammy went to work with Pastor Paul. And I said, oh, okay, that's interesting. And so then without asking me, they just went to HR and put my name in that, oh, she's gonna come in for interview. But I wasn't looking for a job. I was like, what? You did what? You put my name in? Like, I can't work at the church, seriously? Like, have you heard me talk? Like, I can't be working, And
so you were attending by this time.
I was attending maybe a year here. So it was my church.
Right.
So now I feel guilty because it's my church. How can I not show up? So, of course, now I show up, fill out an application, put it in, and I'm like, I told my husband, like, I don't understand this, but I don't need a job. Like, that's not happening. So I come in for the interview, and did not go well, I don't think, but because I'm not really, I've never interviewed for a job in my life. So, like, all these preparations people do and all these books out there about how to interview, like, I would never get a job because, when David asked me, like, so
what are your strengths?
Why are you here? I'm like, I don't know. I don't need this job. Like, I don't want a job here. Literally, it was not good.
I don't even know why I'm here interviewing.
I did tell him that. I said, I don't know why I'm here. I really don't. I think it's just obedience because, they put my name in. And then he's like, well, okay, let's talk about this anyway. And then he's like, well, what are your strengths? I'm like, okay, well, I'm good at this or good at that. I don't know what I said, but I do know what I said when he asked me, what are your weaknesses? Because I'm sitting here thinking, who in their right mind tell their weaknesses at a job interview? I'm like not understanding this at all.
That's a standard question, though.
I know it. Now I know.
Yeah.
But, at that time, I was like, oh, I don't know. I don't like to answer uncomfortable phone calls. That was my answer. I will never forget it. I'm sure David thought, oh, my, okay.
Well, you must have done pretty good because you got the job.
I think it was God's hand. I did not deserve the job.
Okay.
I did not deserve the job. I just got the job because God wanted me here for whatever reason. And but the funny thing out of all this is when he offered me a job, because we're still talking about this, when he called me 2 weeks later after he interviewed everybody, that moment on the phone, we do not remember the same way. I remember it, he called me and I accepted the job. And he remembers it, calling me, offering me a job. And I said to him, well, it's about time. That supposedly those were my words to him. So, yes.
Wow.
I know, right? This is what I said.
how
You
you
never
started,
know what
yeah.
comes out of my mouth.
Yeah, exactly. Now, somewhere between that interview and you coming to McGregor, you came to know Christ, right?
Yes, I did. Of course.
Of course. Well,
Yes.
Don't want to assume anything.
Yes, no. I came forward here at McGregor. My husband always tells that he walked me down first for salvation and then for marrying me right here.
So you've been serving here at McGregor now as David's administrative assistant for how long?
16 years.
16 years. Wow.
I know.
That's a long time, isn't it?
It is a long time. It doesn't seem that way, but it is.
Now, there are other things that you are involved in here at McGregor. And specifically, as I mentioned in the opening, you are the director of the women's ministry.
Right.
How did that come about?
I think it started out with my passion for teaching because that was kind of like my background. And I just wanted to, because I just love to read God's word. And I think when you have a gift of teaching, you have this feeling that you have to share it with other people. Like whatever you learn, you just have to tell about it and then just tell other people to make sure they know too. And so I wanted to teach a study. And back then, Tamar Miller was the women's ministry director. And so she sat down with me and she said, okay, let's talk about this, what you're going to teach and how. And so I started with that. That's how I ended up, that's how I started.
What was the first class you taught?
In My Father's House. By Mary Cassian.
Oh, okay.
It spoke to me because of my family history with my dad. I needed that. I needed personally that study really for looking at my heavenly Father differently than my earthly father, and that's what that was about.
Yeah. So you taught that class and you stayed involved in women's ministry.
Yes.
What happened next?
And then Margie Wicks became the women's ministry director, and her and I worked closely together. At that point, women's ministry was also part of my job for a little time. It became a part of my job. And so we worked very closely together, and we just worked so well, for years together. And then it's just developed from there, doing more and more. And then I ended up getting on the leadership team, working with her. And so it's just kind of developed into this.
So how long
position.
have you now been the ministry director?
So I just looked it up because I never kept up with that. I'm not really good with how many years things, but it's actually 9 years now.
Wow.
9 years. That's a long time.
That is.
I know. I
So
couldn't believe
16
it.
years on staff and 9 years as the women's ministry director.
I know, that's a long
awesome.
time.
Yeah. So think about it, from the time you got here, didn't know Christ in a personal way. We're not a follower of Christ. Barely spoke English.
Yes, exactly.
Working in the furniture store. And now for the last 9 years, you've been the ministry director of our women's ministry, and as well as serving on staff here for 16 years. That's quite a journey, looking back on those last 16 years, maybe the last 9 years. What are some things that stand out that, wow, God really taught me some amazing things, or these are some key things I've learned through that journey? Because that really is a neat journey that you've gone through. Maybe even before then, you might want to share some things as well.
So what I learned from God's sovereign hand is that I really don't deserve where I'm at, and I'm really not qualified to work here because I know so many other women that would be so much more qualified. But God has a plan, and His plan is what it is. So I think if you're available and you're willing and you're listening and you trust Him, He will show everybody their plan, And so I just had to go with it and say, okay, I'm not qualified, but this is what He wants from me. So He's going to get me through it, and He does.
Yeah, absolutely. You have a passion for women's ministry, obviously. Tell us a little bit about why women's ministry, because you were involved in it for all those years now as the director. Give me a little bit of your heart, your passion for specifically for this ministry.
Well, I think my passion started out, like I said, with teaching. But then when you teach women and then you get to know them, then you get to know their hearts. And the more I got to know women personally and where they are in life, I realized how we all the same. in a way, we all struggle with the same things. You know, we're all insecure. We just struggle with different things at different stages of life. And so I think my passion went from, not as much as from teaching, but more like developed into passion for women and see what their needs are, you know, and because we are to, you know, share the gospel and to teach them God's word. And that is definitely a huge part of, this is a church and it's a ministry. But just like Jesus, you know, there's a saying like, people don't want to hear what you have to say until you know that you care. Mm-hmm. And caring, you know, is what almost came later. You know, teaching was first, but then caring, when you get to know the women, you realize, you know, that there are the young moms with the kids, that it's a totally different struggle than the ones that have kids in school, or the ones that their kids are, you know, they're becoming empty nesters, or the widows. You know, there's all these stages of life, and I just started to really care about the women and what they're struggling with, and see what we can do, you know, as a church, because then they will hear what we have to say.
So really it's caring about the whole person, not just them getting information or being taught, but really a full ministry of being able to meet their needs and disciple them in that way. Yeah. You mentioned several different groups real quickly there. Talk a little bit about what women's ministry has to offer for these different stages of life.
So that's how I think we developed. There's always someone who's God gifted and who's willing to step up, and it slowly develops. But that's what happened for a ministry for young moms, our beloved ministry. You know, there was several women that had a heart and passion for that age group with young moms, and they worked very hard to develop that ministry. Same all the way to the other end, the widows. You know, it's in the Bible that you should take care of the widows. So we started to look around, and sure enough, you know, there were women that were willing to do the work, and they were available, and they're willing to serve. And so they stepped up, and now God is using them, and it just does amazing things.
Which, by the way, that is such an amazing group. We just had a lunch earlier today, and I try to make it over there as much as I can. And it's so much fun to sit and talk with those ladies, and you know, just a room full of ladies that, you know, that have something in common. They've all lost their spouse, but yet there's a lot of joy in that room, and love and excitement, and what a blessing that ministry is. How long has that been going now?
6 years, I think.
6 years. Wow.
And you know, it's so neat because it's like we just talked today with Donna, the director of the Widows Ministry, is that if somebody needs a ride, another widow will make sure that they go and get her. You know, like they minister now to each other. So it's not just us to them, but they now finding out each other's needs, and then they can minister to each other, and they can find friends that they can hang out with when they're lonely. I mean, it's just a beautiful thing that developed, you know, in that ministry.
And I know, coming out of, or still in really, our pandemic, and how difficult it's been, the isolation part, I know they were extremely excited about coming back. And the first time you met, you're like, there'll probably be a few people that show up, but it was a whole bunch.
No, there was a lot that came back.
They were ready to be back. So you've got the young moms, you've got the widows. What are some other areas that you're...
We have a ministry called Prayer Shaw Ministry, and they minister to people that are struggling with illnesses, different kind of illnesses. They knit and crochet, they like that, so they use that gift to minister to others. And that's a group that met through the pandemic, through Zoom, and they were knitting at home and doing the little Zoom meeting. So it's really neat.
That's awesome.
We worked this out.
Yeah. What are some like general classes for all ages, things you have going on?
We always have Bible studies, and now because of the pandemic, we have an online Bible study every Monday night, and we have a class on Wednesday nights. We also have Tuesday morning a precept Bible study going. We have a Snowbird Ladies Bible study on Wednesday morning. So there are several groups to choose from, and we always have something. That's for all ages.
Where's a place, if somebody's listening, they want to find out more about the women's ministry? Is there do you guys have a website?
Yes, we do. We have a website. It's womensministry.mcgregor.net.
Are you offering, is there any online classes going on right now?
Yes. The same class that we teach on Wednesday night is going on Monday night Zoom.
So you got something.
We teach twice. The teacher teaches twice.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so a lot of stuff for women's ministry, and you can find that out at womensministry.mcgregor.net. Okay, good. All right, tell me. I mean, we've served together for a long time, and we've gone on mission trips. How many years have you gone to Guatemala with us, you and John?
I think 8.
8 years, yeah. And so a lot of things. We also have a connection with the health and nutrition that you and I taught. Did we teach it twice?
I don't know. Once. I think it was
Once?
one. We've thought about it twice,
Okay.
but then a pandemic hit.
The hot topic class.
Yes.
Yeah, that. So I consider you a wonderful friend. Tell us something that maybe people don't know about you. I mean, you gave us the past stuff, but what's something that they would be shocked that they knew? Because I know you pretty good, but maybe you even have something that I'm not even aware of.
Well, recent or old?
It can be anything. You.
Well, you do know that I'm like a health nut. Like I like health information. I love doing research on that. So that's recent. If you want an old one, I used to manage a nightclub in Hungary before I came here, but I don't know.
What kind of music?
Probably like, what kind of music we had? I don't even remember.
Well, what was
it was
the kind
so
of-
long ago.
You told me one kind of music you liked. I'm like, really?
I told you that I run for techno.
Yeah, the techno, yeah. But see, that's something nobody would ever guess.
There you go. There's something
there's
new.
there's our piece of information we were looking for. Krisztina likes techno music. I'm not even sure I know what that is.
You should do. I'm
I do?
sure you do.
Maybe I do. Maybe if I heard it, I would go, okay.
Of course you would.
Play some for me later.
Okay.
To find it on my Apple Music.
It's really good to run to.
Yeah. All right. Well, let me see. Is there any way that folks can, any other way they can get involved in women's ministry? I'll leave that as the last question, then we'll wrap up.
I think if someone has a passion to, to minister to women, I just always encourage them to just reach out to me, because you never know what God is starting new, what is developing. You just never know what God puts in someone's heart. So it's really easy to email me. Don't try to spell my name. Just send an email, women@mcgregor.net.
Women@mcgregor.net.
We simplify that because my name is not easy to spell.
We'll put that in the show notes as well as the website for the women's ministry, so folks can find you and find the information real
Definitely.
quickly. Well, I think that wraps up this episode of Here at Home. Thank you so much, Krisztina, for joining us and being a part of our Here at Home podcast family now.
Well,
and thank you, listeners, for being a part of our podcast. What a blessing to be able to share what God is doing here at home and just to be encouraged together. And if you haven't subscribed yet to the podcast, please take a moment to do that. And while you're subscribing, you might want to check out our other podcast channels. Did you know, Krisztina, we have other podcasts, not just the Here at Home podcast. You probably knew that. But maybe some of our listeners don't know that. They can go over to hereathomepodcast.com and they can find out all the information about all the different podcasts that we have. Well, thank you for listening, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks back here at home.